Stop trying to steer the world. First, learn to govern the weather inside you. Master the mind and the outer world will follow. We have a tendency to believe that control is an external exercise, to change circumstances, to outmaneuver rivals, to shape markets and fate. This is the comfortable story of outward agency, but there is a subtler truth, and it is the more consequential. Mastery begins not with machines or plans, but with the climate of the interior. The sovereign within is not a mythic self, but a cultivated capacity to steward attention, to moderate affect, and to choose action with temper and alignment. If you wish to change your world, begin with your weather. Consider the mind as an ecosystem. Weather patterns, storms of anxiety, clouds of fatigue, stretches of joy, determine what grows. If your inner climate is turbulent, your capacity to plan and execute is crippled. Brilliance that blooms in chaos is rare. Steadiness breeds durable outcomes. This is why great leaders describe themselves as calm under pressure, and why those who excel repeatedly talk about inner practices: sleep, stillness, focus. The sovereign does not eliminate storms. The sovereign learns early how to respond to them without panic. What does sovereignty look like? It is the ability to observe a rising fear and to treat it as information rather than an order. It is the capacity to notice when one is being pulled into a story that diminishes agency, and to choose a different narrative. Sovereignty is not detached serenity. It is responsibility. It requires saying, I will not abdicate my interior governance to the first impulse, the first outrage, the first comfort. It entails refusing the myth that being reactive equals being alive. Much of modern life applauds reaction, speed, hot takes, immediate replies. But speed without discernment yields habit, not power. The path toward interior sovereignty begins with 3 commitments. First, commit to the domain of attention. Decide where your mind will habitually rest. Is it on your project? On your worries? On other people's approval? Reallocate your attention deliberately. This is the primary currency. Where you look, energy follows. The habit of glancing at your phone, the habit of rehearsing imagined slights, these are habitual drainers of capacity. The sovereign budgets attention like money. Protect it, invest it, audit it. Second, commit to emotional literacy. The sovereign does not unfeel. The sovereign reads feelings and uses them as guidance. A rise in anger might mean a boundary was crossed. A persistent low mood might indicate a relationship to repair. In both cases, action informed by feeling has more fidelity than action premised on obliviousness. Emotional literacy begins with simple naming and listening. I noticed tightness in my chest after that message, and then asking a utility question. What does this sensation want me to protect? What does it want me to change? The sovereign multiplies insight by converting raw affect into precise tasks. Third, commit to ethical consistency. Control is not merely capacity, it is stewardship. The sovereign uses power to expand capacity, often not choosing spectacle or domination, but the quiet labor of making systems that help others. If governance is only self-serving, it collapses under resentment and the brittle winds of short-term gain. The inner sovereign houses a moral imagination, large enough to steward the small repairs that make collective systems resilient. Practically, the early work is modest and disciplined. Decide each morning 3 things you will defend your attention for. Schedule device-free windows. Learn a simple breath practice to lower arousal. Practice a nightly review where you name where you spent your attention and whether it matched your values. Over months, these small acts steep into disposition. The weather in your interior shifts. You will not become infallible. You will, however, become more dependable to yourself. Finally, understand that sovereignty is contagious. The person with steady interior weather becomes, by mere presence, a small climate shift for others. Teams, families, relationships respond to the predictable gravity of someone whose mind is ordered. In this way, the sovereign within is the beginning of collective reformation. You master your mind and, by example and ripple, you teach others the economy of attention. If you want to control the world, do not begin with force or plans. Begin with the slower, more radical matter of your interior governance. That is where durable influence is grown. Rule your mind first. The rest of the world will yield to someone who is reliably sovereign. Thought is more than private commentary. It is the scaffolding upon which life is built. Ideas become interpretations. Interpretations become expectations, and expectations become the very fabric of experience. When you understand the mechanics of thought, how beliefs are formed, how stories loop, how habits automate, you gain access to the lever that moves your world. Begin with beliefs. Beliefs are energetic filters. They sort information, absorb confirming evidence, and deflect the inconvenient. I am not enough will be reinforced by every neutral event interpreted as evidence. I can learn will refract the same events into data for growth. The first task is inventory. Identify the dominant beliefs that organize your inner life. Ask, what are the rules you habitually follow that you never chose? Where did they come from? Family, school, shame? Once visible, beliefs can be tested. Set experiments. When the belief speaks, make a small choice to test its veracity. Evidence is the tool of revision. Stories are the operating systems. A life narrative. I am the helper who always sacrifices, or I am the unlucky one, organizes your positions in relationship, career, and risk. Stories explain and then prescribe. They say, if this is your story, here are the moves you should not make. Here are the people you avoid. Here is the scale you fear. Rewriting story is not falsifying memory. It is noticing that the narrative is partial and choosing to tell an alternative that opens possibility. Practice reframing with specificity. Notice a recurring story, then deliberately generate an alternate ending that is plausible and practicable. Over weeks, the new narrative gains muscle. Habits do the daily labor. They are the plumbing that routes attention and decision energy. Habits can be designed to be allies, consistent sleep, focused work blocks, repair rituals. Or they can be enemies, compulsive scrolling, avoidance rituals, patterns of projection. To rewire habits, use smallness and cueing. Replace one small habit with another tied to a clear cue and reward. The mechanics are predictable: cue, routine, reward. Design the loop. Keep the change microscopic at first. Habit architecture favors repetition, not heroic will. Language mediates these mechanics. The words you use about yourself and the world calibrate the brain. Replace vague self-condemnation with specific observation. Instead of "I always fail," say "Yesterday's pitch didn't land." The next iteration will try this specific change. Language reframing lowers threat and increases agency. Speak like you are an experimenter in your own life, not a condemned judge. There is also the social wiring. Thoughts are rarely isolated. They circulate. The narratives accepted in your tribe amplify certain beliefs. If your peer group prizes frantic busyness, your habits will skew toward availability. If your group models attention to depth, your calendar will follow. Curate the field where your thoughts sediment. Technically, cognitive mechanics can be improved with practice. Cognitive behavioral tools, reflective journaling, and deliberate exposure to contrary evidence. These are mechanics, not mysteries. A systematic, humble approach allows you to disassemble and reassemble the mental machinery that governs your action. Mastering the mechanics of thought is less glamorous than talent or strategy, but it is more potent. A life remodeled at the level of belief, story, and habit quietly repatterns the external world. When your operating system changes, the same circumstances produce different outcomes because you respond differently. That is the power of interior engineering. You are not merely subject to thought, you are its architect. Learn the mechanics and redesign the structures that produce your life. Emotion has a bad reputation in our culture, as if to feel is to be undone by feeling. Yet emotion is the oldest form of intelligence we possess. It is immediate, embodied information about what matters in the present moment. When treated as a compass rather than a siren, emotion guides decisions with far greater fidelity than abstract analysis alone. First, shift the posture. Feel to inform, not to obey. Many are raised to distrust emotional signals, taught to substitute thinking for feeling. The result is brittle decisions that are logically coherent, but disconnected from the human terrain. The alternative is to receive emotion, name it, and ask what it is pointing to. Anger might point at a boundary violation. Grief might indicate a loss that requires rearrangement. Shame might tell you something about relational repair. Naming, "I feel tightness in my chest and heat in my face," interrupts automatic reaction and gives the prefrontal cortex space to choose. Second, practice felt inquiry. When a strong feeling arises, pause and map it. Where is it in the body? What memories or images accompany it? What narrative usually rides on it? Then ask, what does this feeling want me to protect or create? The answer is rarely simple, but the practice converts noise into direction. It is not therapy, it is craft. Third, refine emotional regulation as a performance skill. Use breath to lower arousal. Use grounding to shift hyperarousal into manageable attention. This is not suppression but modulation. A regulated system allows emotion to inform without hijacking. Train the nervous system with repeated micro-practices. A 4 to 6 breathing ratio, short grounding exercises, sensory anchors. These simple tools create a stable platform from which feeling can be turned into strategy. Fourth, honor positive affect as data. Pleasure, curiosity, and ease are not secondary. They are signals of alignment. Too often people chase pleasure as avoidance. Instead, notice what feels alive. Follow curiosity in small experiments. When a subject lights you up, the emotion is evidence of aptitude or vocation. Use it to allocate attention and test. Fifth, integrate social emotion into decision-making. Empathy, gratitude, and sorrow inform relational strategy. Empathy is not only moral, it is intelligence about others. It lets you read the field and choose interventions that have traction. Gratitude recalibrates focus away from scarcity and toward resources. These emotional habits change the tone of leadership and the texture of influence. Finally, accept that emotion includes shadow. Some feelings will be messy. That is the point. The sovereign mind does not pretend that everything is clean. It learns to work on things that are not. The courage is to feel what must be felt. Receive the information and then act with calibrated courage. Emotion as compass changes your relationship to feeling from fear to partnership. When feeling is integrated into the decision process, your choices are not simply rational artifacts. They are whole-person acts, more durable, humane, and wise. Let emotion point the way. Let discipline carry you there. There is an officer within you who must be trained, someone who stands between raw impulse and intelligent action. The training is tactical, practical, and iterative. 3 implements form the officer's kit: attention, will, and ritual. Together, they convert intention into reliable practice. Attention is the first instrument. It is the bandwidth through which all change flows. Train attention with progressive constraint. Begin with short, focused sessions and lengthen them. Treat distractions as data, not moral failures. Build environments that reduce friction for attention. Single-tasking windows, device-free zones, and curated input. The disciplined allocation of attention is not ascetic. It is pragmatic. If you are a novelist, 20-minute blocks matter more than scattered hours of scrolling. If you are a leader, uninterrupted time to think is the strategic advantage. Will is the muscle for carrying through. Will is not raw force. It is the capacity to follow through on small promises to self. Begin with tiny, non-negotiable practices. 5 minutes of writing daily, a single physical practice, 1 moment of apology. Each kept promise increases your credibility to yourself and lowers the friction of larger commitments. Use implementation intentions. Decide in advance the when, where, and how. Structure reduces reliance on heroic resistance. Ritual is the scaffolding that enshrines habits. A ritual is a sequence of cues that compress attention into meaningful action. A morning ritual might include light, movement, a short page of free writing, and a discrete plan for the day. Rituals have cultural power because they anchor identity. They are portable and repeatable, and through repetition they become reliable anchors in chaotic days. Combine these tools with measurement. The inner officer is evidence-based. Track minutes of focus, count fulfilled promises, journal notes on ritual fidelity. Measurement is not about shame. It is about feedback. Where patterns show, you can decide to iterate. The training also requires psychological infrastructure, commitments to rest, a tolerance for boredom in practice, and an understanding that growth is incremental. The officer learns in repetitions, not spectacles. He does not await perfect motivation. He acts and thereby generates motivation. This is the ancient practice. Motion precedes mood. Teach the officer the rules of engagement. When distraction arises, 1 rule: return to breath and 1 task. When strong emotion arises, 1 rule: name, map, and decide 1 small repair action. Build a short playbook of these micro-actions. They become reflexive under stress and preserve sovereignty. Finally, create public accountability. Rituals and promises kept in private are fragile. Share a practice with a friend or a small group. The social scaffolding raises the cost of abandonment and increases the likelihood of fidelity. Train attention, fortify will, and temple the practice into ritual. The inner officer grows then from an aspiration into a practical commander who leads the mind through ordinary days. That presence is how intentions transmogrify into lived outcome. Small disciplined acts win the long war. Train the officer within with care and grit. Mastery without tact becomes tyranny. Tact without mastery becomes drift. The crafts of language, boundary setting, and micro-tactics are the gears of practical sovereignty. They protect your interior rule while preserving humane engagement with the world. Boundaries are energy architecture. They tell others how your time and attention are to be engaged. Boundaries are not walls. They are lines on the map that prevent entropy. Define temporal boundaries, your work hours, your no meeting windows, device-free evenings. Define relational boundaries, what tone you will accept, how you will respond to requests, and what behavior you will not enable. Boundary setting is not about rigidity but clarity. Use short, neutral language. I don't answer work messages after 8 p.m. Or, I can't take that on right now. Clear language reduces drama and preserves capacity. Language frames reality. How you name experience shapes your next move. Replace exaggeration with precision. Instead of I'm overwhelmed, try my inbox has 50 items and I will address 3 now. Replace moralizing with tactical description. Instead of they hurt me, try that comment felt dismissive. I want to name it in the next conversation. This pragmatic recoding reduces emotional escalation and converts reactions into repairable moves. Small tactics are the unspectacular maneuvers that win daily fights. Use the 2-minute rule for small tasks so they do not accumulate. Use micro-repair when you err. A short apology and a corrective step restore trust quickly. Use the pause protocol in conversations. Breathe 2 counts before replying to keep reactivity low. Use an information diet. Check feeds at scheduled times rather than continuous grazing. Another tactical move is to craft a short planning ritual before important interactions. 1 minute to set your intention. 1 sentence to name your desired outcome. 1 breath to anchor. This minimal prep dramatically changes the tone of the exchange. Similarly, a short debrief after interactions, 1 sentence on what went well and 1 action to improve, accelerates learning. Tactical humility matters. When you find yourself overreach, step back and do a small repair. When you make a promise you cannot keep, fix it quickly. These small acts prevent the slow corrosion of credibility. Finally, remember scalability. Tactics are personal but also policy. Build these practices into shared norms, team calendars that protect focus time, family rituals that honor presence, public language that models repair. When tactics become norms, they protect not just you but the systems you inhabit. Boundaries, precise language, and micro-tactics are daily tools of sovereignty. Use them to preserve your inner rule and make mastery practical. When interior governance is established, influence flows outward but in a particular character. Quiet, steady, and cumulative. The mastered mind changes work, transforms relationships, and architects legacy through patient fidelity rather than spectacle. In work, mastery yields depth. The person who can sustain attention produces work that accumulates value because it is revised, tested, and improved. Leadership becomes less about rhetorical dominance and more about structural generosity. Clearing calendars for teams to think, designing feedback systems that prioritize learning and modeling repair after failure. Influence in organizations often begins with micro-practices. A leader who leaves meeting time for reflection, who apologizes when wrong, who shields focus time for people. These small structures recalibrate culture more reliably than 1,000 slogans. In relationships, inner sovereignty changes tone. Presence becomes the currency, listening without the need to be right, apologizing with specificity, and offering consistent small gestures of reliability remake trust. People are tired of grand declarations and hunger for dependable acts. Mastery makes you the person who can sit with pain without urgent fixes, who can hold a difficult conversation without escalation, who can forgive and then follow through on repair. Influence in love is quiet stewardship. As for legacy, the mastered mind builds systems that outlast a single body. Teach practices, fund apprenticeships, design institutions that institutionalize attention and repair. Legacy is not merely bequeathing wealth but bequeathing practice, a school that teaches inner work, a manuscript of reflections that guides successors, a ritual that families perform. The sovereign plans for transmission. How will the practice survive your absence? Invest in redundancy. Multiple apprentices, documented procedures, rituals that are simple enough to be replicated. There is an ethical contour here. With outward influence comes responsibility. Not everyone who has inner power uses it well. The true test is whether your influence expands the capacities of others or narrows them. Use influence to decentralize, to teach, to repair, to fund. A mastered mind is not an island of excellence. It is an anchor for larger systems. Finally, remember, scale is patient. The ripples of interior mastery grow slowly. Do not expect immediate empire. Expect changed conversations, improved products, steadier relationships, and a slow accumulation of trust. These are the durable things. They outlast viral fame and weather storms. Master your mind not for vanity but for stewardship. Let the quiet work of interior governance become the engine of an outer life that heals, builds, and endures.